The massive crystal towers of Ethros Prime stretched toward two burning suns, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that would make human eyes water. Inside the tallest spire, the Zephyrian High Council had gathered for what they believed would be a routine discussion about pest control. They had no idea they were about to poke the most dangerous creature the galaxy had ever produced. Ambassador Veltar activated the holographic displays with a graceful wave of his elongated arm. Blue lights danced through the air, showing star, maps, ship designs, and population centers of the species they simply called humans. To the confluence, these beings looked pathetically primitive, like children playing with fire while living in wooden houses. "Honored counselors," Veltar began, his voice carrying the musical quality that all Zephyrians possessed, "the human infestation has spread to 12 systems in the past 50 rotations. Their technology remains laughably inferior, yet they continue to ignore our territorial boundaries." Elder Counselor Thexani, whose crystalline features had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, examined the human data with growing irritation. These creatures used chemical explosions to leave their planet's surface. They fired metal chunks at each other as weapons. Their largest warships were smaller than Confluent's pleasure craft. Most amusing of all, they seemed to think they owned every rock they could land on. "Look at this primitive nonsense." Thexani gestured at images of human colonies. "They build on worlds without asking permission. They strip mine asteroids like common raiders. They even dare to establish military bases in systems we marked for future development." His voice carried the tone of someone discussing badly behaved pets. The other council members murmured agreement. The Confluence had been the galaxy's dominant power for 50,000 years. They had guided hundreds of younger species toward civilization, always with patience and wisdom. But humans seemed different. Every diplomatic message was ignored. Every offer of guidance was rejected with what their translators could only render as colorful language. "Perhaps," suggested Counselor Zephyra, "they simply don't understand our superiority. Their development has been so isolated, so stunted, that they cannot recognize a higher form of life when they encounter it." This drew amused sounds from the assembly. The idea that any species could be ignorant of Confluent's greatness seemed almost charming in its impossibility. After all, the Zephyrians had perfected energy manipulation, while humans were still hitting rocks with sticks. They had built a galactic civilization while humanity was figuring out how to make fire without rubbing wood together. Veltar activated another display showing human military capabilities. Their analysis was thorough and damning. Human ships relied on crude fusion reactors that the Confluence had abandoned as children's toys millennia ago. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles accelerated by chemical reactions. They had no energy shields, no antimatter propulsion, no quantum communication, networks. Fighting them would be like an adult wrestling with toddlers. "I propose a standard demonstration of force," Thexani announced. 3 battle fleets should suffice. We'll position them at the edge of human space and give these creatures the traditional 72-hour ultimatum. Once they see our power, they'll surely submit to proper guidance. The vote was unanimous and swift. The Confluence had performed this same ritual hundreds of times with hundreds of species. A show of overwhelming force followed by generous terms of surrender, followed by gradual integration into their galactic community. It was a dance as old as their civilization, and it always ended the same way. Within hours, orders went out to battle fleet commanders across 3 sectors. The ships that responded were works of art as much as weapons of war. Sleek organic curves that seemed grown rather than built, hulls that shifted color like oil on water, energy weapons that could crack moons in half. Each vessel represented thousands of years of technological advancement and peaceful development. Meanwhile, on a small blue world called Earth, President Lee Min-ho stood before an emergency session of the United Colonies Assembly. The alien message had been received on every human communication channel simultaneously, translated into every human language with perfect accuracy. The meaning was crystal clear, even if the arrogance behind it made human blood boil. The assembled representatives sat in stunned silence as the ultimatum played for the 3rd time. Withdraw from all disputed territories. Submit to Confluence, authority, accept guidance in exchange for continued existence. The alternative was complete annihilation of the human species. Lee Min-ho had served in 3 interstellar conflicts and helped establish humanity's first off-world colonies. He had seen human beings accomplish impossible things through sheer stubborn determination. Now he looked out at representatives from dozens of human worlds, each face showing the same mixture of outrage and grim determination that had carried humanity from caves to starships. "Distinguished delegates," he said quietly, "we've just received our first lesson in galactic politics. Apparently we're supposed to be grateful that someone wants to put us in a cage." His voice carried across the silent chamber like the calm before a storm. "I have a different lesson to teach them," Lee continued, his words now carrying the weight of an entire species' defiance. "They think we're primitives playing with toys. They think we'll roll over and show our bellies like good little pets." He paused, meeting the eyes of each representative. "Let's show them what happens when you threaten a human's family." Commander Park Ji-sung felt the deck plates vibrate under his boots as another energy blast hammered the defiant dawn. The bridge lights flickered, casting dancing shadows across the faces of his crew. Through the reinforced viewports, he could see Kepler Station burning like a miniature sun, its defense platforms reduced to twisted metal and escaping atmosphere. "Damage report," Park called out, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. Years of training had taught him that panic was a luxury no commander could afford, especially when facing an enemy that seemed to have stepped out of a science fiction movie. Lieutenant Kim Summon's fingers danced across her console, pulling up system readouts that painted a grim picture. "Hull integrity down to 60%, sir. Forward armor is completely gone, but the backup plating is holding. We've lost 3 gun turrets and our main reactor is running hot." The Confluence fleet hung in space like a collection of deadly jewels. 300 ships arranged in perfect mathematical formation, their hulls shimmering with energy shields that made them look like soap bubbles floating in the void. At the center, Admiral Kethmore's flagship, Eternal Wisdom, dominated the battlefield, a kilometer-long masterpiece that seemed more grown than built. Park had studied the intelligence reports, but seeing Confluence technology in action was something else entirely. Their ships moved with fluid grace, turning and banking like living creatures rather than machines. Energy beams lanced out from weapon ports that seemed to exist wherever they were needed, and when human kinetic rounds struck their shields, they simply absorbed the impact like water accepting thrown stones. "Sir," Kim continued, studying her tactical display with growing confusion, "something's not right about their targeting. They're hitting our weapons and engines, but they're deliberately avoiding life support and crew sections. It's like they're trying to disable us without actually killing anyone." Park allowed himself a thin smile. The Confluence's first mistake was assuming humans fought the same way they did. "That's going to cost them," he muttered, then opened the fleet communication channel. "All vessels, this is Park. Execute Protocol 7 immediately." Across the human battle line, something unprecedented happened. Ships that had been firing steady streams of kinetic rounds suddenly went silent. Not retreating, not surrendering, just waiting with the patience of predators who had spotted their prey. The sudden quiet seemed to puzzle the Confluence forces, who began broadcasting surrender demands in their musical language. Admiral Kethmore's voice echoed across all frequencies, translated by systems that had apparently never encountered human sarcasm before. "Primitive humans, you have fought bravely but futilely. Cease your resistance and prepare to be boarded. We offer you the mercy of continued existence under proper guidance." Park checked his chronometer. The timing had to be perfect, down to the second. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, objects that had been launched months ago were finally reaching their destination. Human military doctrine had always been built around a simple principle. If you're going to fight someone, make sure you throw the first punch and the last one too. "Message received, Admiral," Park replied, his voice carrying across both fleets. "But I think you misunderstood something about human military doctrine. The first relativistic kill vehicle struck Eternal Wisdom, amidships at 12% of light speed. The projectile was nothing fancy, just a tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole accelerated to speeds that turned it into the universe's most expensive bullet. It punched through the Confluence flagship's energy shields as if they were tissue, paper, and the impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The great ship's exotic matter containment systems destabilized in a cascade failure that lit up the night across 3 star systems. Admiral Kethmore's final transmission was a single word in the Confluence language that roughly translated to impossible, though it carried undertones of betrayal and complete bewilderment. The eternal wisdom broke apart like a glass sculpture dropped from a great height, its death throes visible from orbit around distant planets. But that was just the beginning. More RKVs emerged from the darkness, each one targeted at a different Confluence vessel. The aliens had made their formations too perfect, too predictable. Human targeting computers had been calculating firing solutions for months, waiting for an enemy obliging enough to arrive exactly where they were expected. The Confluence fleet tried to scatter, but their elegant formations became death traps. Ships collided with each other as they attempted emergency maneuvers their designers had never anticipated. Energy shields that had seemed invincible proved useless against projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed. Within minutes, over half the Confluence fleet was either destroyed or crippled. Impossible, came frantic transmissions from surviving Confluence commanders. How did you know where we would be? How did you launch weapons that have been traveling for months? Park opened a channel to the remaining alien ships, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for exactly this moment. Behind him, the debris of the eternal wisdom continued to burn against the stars. A funeral pyre for the Confluence's assumptions about human capabilities. This is Commander Park Ji-sung of the Human Defense Force, he said calmly. You came here to teach us about superior technology and overwhelming force. He gestured to the wreckage drifting around them. Class is now in session. The surviving Confluence ships began broadcasting surrender signals in 17 different galactic languages. But Park wasn't finished with his lesson. Dr. Choi Yuna stepped carefully through the corridors of the captured Confluence vessel, Harmony's voice, her boots making soft echoes against walls that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. Everything about the ship felt alien in ways that made her skin crawl. The corridors curved like living arteries, the walls glowed with soft bioluminescent patterns, and the air carried a faint floral scent that reminded her of gardens she'd never seen on worlds she'd never visited. Her xenobiology kit hummed quietly as it recorded everything, from atmospheric composition to the strange way gravity seemed to flow more gently here than on human ships. But what fascinated her most were the prisoners themselves. The Confluence beings were nothing like the monsters she'd expected. Tall and graceful, with elongated limbs that moved like dancers, they possessed faces that looked carved from living crystal. Even in captivity, they maintained a dignity that seemed built into their very bones. Their large, multifaceted eyes reflected intelligence and something else that took her a moment to identify: genuine confusion. You are the scientist, said the prisoner, who had identified himself as Sub-Commander Velcorin. His voice sounded like wind chimes even when filtered through the translation matrix. Perhaps you can explain to me what your species has accomplished. Yuna set up her recording equipment, trying to keep her hands steady. First contact protocols were one thing in training simulations, but sitting across from a being whose civilization was older than human agriculture was something else entirely. What do you mean by accomplished? Velcorin's crystalline features shifted in what might have been distress. We have studied warfare for 30,000 of your years. We understand strategy, tactics, the proper application of force to achieve political objectives. We have ended conflicts across 100 worlds. He paused, those strange eyes focusing on her with uncomfortable intensity. But what you call warfare is something entirely different. How so? You destroyed Admiral Kethmore's flagship with a weapon that had been traveling through space since before our fleets even departed for your systems. Velcorin leaned forward slightly. How did you know we would come to that precise location? How did you predict our formations, our approach vectors, even our tactical doctrines? Yuna felt a chill run down her spine. We didn't know you specifically would come. We've been preparing for someone to come since we first left our home system. We don't know who our enemies will be, so we prepare for everyone to be our enemy. The silence that followed was profound. Velcorin seemed to be processing something that didn't fit into his understanding of how intelligent species should behave. Your entire civilization is structured around the assumption of inevitable conflict. Our entire civilization exists because we're very good at conflict, Una corrected gently. We've been at war with something for our entire evolutionary history. First with our environment, then with predators, then with each other, then with the limitations of our own biology and technology. War isn't something that happens to us occasionally. It's what we do. 3 sectors away, Supreme Commander Azexhul was receiving reports from his Second Fleet that challenged everything he thought he understood about civilized behavior. The humans had somehow converted their entire civilian population into military assets overnight. Children barely old enough to walk operated defensive systems with mechanical precision. Elderly humans piloted explosive-laden shuttles into confluence formations with the calm acceptance of beings who had already made peace with death. The intercepted human communications were even more disturbing. Confluence translation computers struggled with concepts that seemed to have no equivalent in their language. Phrases like acceptable loss ratios, strategic depth, and total war kept appearing in human transmissions, but the translators could only render them as approximate meanings surrounded by error codes. They're not just fighting a war, Azexhul realized as he watched another Confluence cruiser disappear in nuclear fire. They've weaponized their entire species. Back on the captured ship, Una was beginning to understand the scope of what humanity had stumbled into. Tell me about your people, she said to Velcorin. How do you normally handle conflicts? Conflicts are rare, he replied. When they occur, we demonstrate superior force until the opposing side recognizes the futility of resistance. Most species surrender quickly once they understand our technological advantages. Casualties are minimal, integration is swift, and both civilizations benefit from the exchange. And if they don't surrender? Velcorin looked genuinely puzzled. They always surrender. What would be the point of fighting a battle you cannot win? Why would any rational being choose death over guidance toward a better existence? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything humans had ever believed about themselves. Una found herself thinking about Earth's history, about all the times humans had chosen death over surrender, about battles fought against impossible odds, by people who knew they were going to die but fought anyway, because something was more important than their own survival. Because, she said slowly, some things are worth dying for, and some things are worth killing for. Your people evolved past that instinct, but we never did. We can't turn off our fight response any more than we can stop breathing. Velcorin's expression shifted to something that might have been horror. You mean your species has retained its predatory nature even after achieving space travel? We didn't just retain it, Una said. We perfected it. Every human innovation, every technological breakthrough, every social advancement has been driven by our need to be better at surviving in a hostile universe. We turned competition into cooperation, but we never stopped seeing the universe as something that wants to kill us. The realization seemed to hit both of them simultaneously. Evolution had shaped their species as perfect opposites. The confluence had transcended their violent origins to create a peaceful galactic civilization. Humans had weaponized their violent origins to become the galaxy's most efficient predators. Your people came here expecting to fight another version of yourselves, Una said quietly. Instead, you found something that evolution spent 4 billion years designing to kill things like you. General Quan Daisung stood 3 kilometers beneath the ruins of Seoul, surrounded by screens that showed a galaxy on fire. The command center had been carved from solid rock over decades, designed to survive everything from nuclear strikes to asteroid impacts. Now it served as the nerve center for humanity's most desperate gambit. The holographic display floating in the center of the room told a story that would have seemed impossible just months earlier. Red dots marked confluence positions, blue showed human forces, and the growing number of purple indicators represented something new entirely. Systems where both species had fought each other to extinction, leaving nothing but empty space and Radiation. Status report. Quan ordered, his voice echoing in the cavernous chamber that had become humanity's last command post. Colonel Yang Minji looked up from her console, her face pale in the blue glow of the tactical displays. The Titan shipyards have completed their final production run. 700 automated vessels are entering hyperspace as we speak, each one carrying enough antimatter to turn a planet into a short-lived star. Quan nodded grimly. The Titan facilities had been humanity's most closely guarded secret since the first interstellar colonies were established. Entire moons converted into self-replicating factories that could build warships faster than any biological crew could operate them. The ships they produced weren't elegant like confluence vessels, just functional blocks of armor and weapons controlled by artificial intelligences that felt no fear, needed no rest, and followed orders with mechanical precision. And Earth's evacuation? 87% complete. The remaining 13% have volunteered to stay for the final phase. Minji's voice caught slightly. Most of them are children and elderly. They say if Earth dies, they want to die with it. On the main display, Earth itself had become the ultimate weapon. The blue marble that had given birth to humanity was now a carefully orchestrated trap. Its surface was honeycombed with fusion charges powerful enough to crack continents. Orbital platforms bristled with kinetic launchers that could throw projectiles at relativistic speeds. Even the planet's core had been rigged with exotic matter devices that would turn Earth into a miniature supernova if triggered. The plan was simple in its brutality. Make Earth so dangerous to approach that any enemy would have to destroy it from long range, and make that destruction trigger the annihilation of every confluence world in known space. Mutually assured destruction on a galactic scale, implemented by a species that had spent its entire history preparing for exactly this scenario. Supreme Commander Azex Hul's Third Fleet was the largest military force the Confluence had ever assembled. Over 2,000 vessels, each one a masterpiece of biotechnology that had taken centuries to grow and decades to properly crew. As they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, they found themselves facing a mere 300 human ships arranged in a loose defensive formation around their homeworld. The human fleet looked pathetic by comparison. Ugly, angular vessels that seemed built from spare parts and held together by determination. No elegant curves, no shimmering energy shields, just functional armor plating and weapons that looked like they'd been bolted on as an afterthought. It was like watching a pack of wolves prepare to fight a herd of gazelles. "This is Supreme Commander Azex Hul of the Confluence Third Fleet." His transmission echoed across all frequencies, translated into the harsh, guttural sounds that humans called language. "Humans of Earth, you face overwhelming superiority in numbers, technology, and tactical experience. Surrender now, and your species will be preserved under proper Confluence guidance. Continue this futile resistance, and we will be forced to demonstrate why our civilization has endured for 50,000 years." The response came from Admiral Li Jiyong aboard the human flagship Last Resort. Her image appeared on screens throughout both fleets. A middle-aged woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much war. Behind her, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, beautiful and doomed and defiant. "Commander Azex Hul," she said with the calm voice of someone who had already accepted her own death, "you've made the same mistake that every one of our enemies has made throughout history. You assume we're fighting to win." She gestured to the world behind her, where billions of humans were spending their final hours with their families, writing last letters and preparing for the end of everything they had ever known. "We're not fighting to win. We stopped believing in victory about the time your first fleet showed up. We're fighting to make sure that if we lose, you lose too." The Confluence fleet moved into attack formation, their weapons charging with energies that could boil oceans and crack moons. But as they approached Earth's defensive perimeter, human ships began broadcasting a single message on all frequencies. Data packets containing the complete genetic and cultural heritage of humanity, along with detailed records of everything that had led to this moment. "We want the galaxy to know what happened here," Lee's voice continued as the first energy beams began to lance through space. "We want them to know that when someone came to destroy the human race, we made sure to take our killers with us. The Planet-killer weapons struck Earth's surface 6 hours later, cracking continents and boiling seas. As humanity's birth world died in fire and plasma, automated systems throughout the galaxy received the same simple message that had been prepared for this moment since humans first reached the stars. Protocol Omega is now active. Earth is dead. Everything else dies with it. 700 unmanned vessels, each carrying the concentrated hatred of an extinct species, began their final approaches to every confluence world in known space. Elder Counselor Thexani floated in, the zero gravity of his dying command ship, watching the final transmissions from confluence worlds across the galaxy flicker and die one by one. Each message was the same, a human vessel appearing out of nowhere, broadcasting evacuation warnings in perfect confluence language, then systematically destroying everything that had taken millennia to build. The screens around him showed the death of a civilization. Ethros Prime, with its crystal spires that had stood for 50,000 years, was now a field of radioactive glass. The Garden Worlds, where confluence poets had written verses about eternal beauty, were burning wastelands. Even the sacred archives containing the accumulated wisdom of hundreds of species had been reduced to ash and radiation. His communication array sparked to life with an incoming transmission from the Sol system. The image that appeared showed a human female in a tattered military uniform, her face streaked with blood and soot. Behind her, the twisted wreckage of what had once been Earth's moon drifted through space like a graveyard of stone and metal. The blue world that had given birth to humanity was gone, leaving only an expanding cloud of superheated gas and the bitter taste of mutual destruction. "This is Admiral Shin Yaren of the Human Defense Force," the woman said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had watched her entire world die. "I believe you wanted to talk." Thexani activated his own transmitter, allowing the human to see him properly for the first time. His crystalline features, normally elegant and composed, now showed cracks that ran deeper than mere physical damage. "I am Elder Counselor Thexani. I speak for what remains of the confluence. And I speak for what remains of humanity," Yaren replied. Around her, other humans moved through the wreckage of their command ship with the mechanical efficiency of people who had moved beyond grief into something colder and more dangerous. Their faces showed the same grim determination that had carried their species from caves to starships to this final moment of galactic warfare. "Your species has accomplished something no civilization in recorded galactic history has ever attempted," Thexani said, his voice carrying a mixture of horror and unwilling admiration. "You have chosen complete mutual annihilation over surrender." Yaren's laugh was bitter, carrying the sound of someone who had lost everything and found it almost funny. "We didn't choose anything, Counselor. This is just what we are." She gestured to the debris field that had once been Earth's defensive fleet, where human and confluence wreckage drifted together in death. "You wanted to understand what makes humans dangerous? It's not our weapons or our technology or our tactics. It's that we've been an extinction-level event since we first picked up rocks and threw them at each other. Then why are you contacting me? If your species truly embraces mutual destruction, why seek communication now?" Yaren was quiet for a long moment, staring at something beyond the camera's range. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weariness that seemed to come from the bones. "Because maybe it's time for both our species to try something we've never done before. Maybe it's time to stop." The conversation that followed lasted 18 hours and changed the course of galactic history. Two ancient civilizations balanced on the knife's edge of complete extinction slowly began to understand what they had become and what they might choose to be instead. Thexani learned about humanity's evolutionary path, how every step toward our civilization had been driven by competition, conflict, and the constant threat of extinction. How humans had developed technology not out of curiosity or wisdom, but out of desperation to survive in a universe that seemed designed to kill them. How their greatest achievements had always come from their darkest moments, when survival required them to become something more dangerous than whatever threatened them. Yaren learned about the Confluence's journey from violence to peace, how They had transcended their predatory origins through millennia of careful evolution and social development. How they had built a galactic civilization based on cooperation and mutual benefit, guiding younger species toward enlightenment rather than conquest. How they had forgotten that some species might take a different path entirely. We represent opposite answers to the same question, Thexani said as dawn broke over the ruins of both civilizations. How should intelligent life respond to a hostile universe? You chose to become more dangerous than anything that threatened you. We chose to become too valuable to destroy. Both approaches worked until we met each other, Yaren replied. Perfect. Peace meeting. Perfect violence. We're like antimatter touching matter. The final decision came not from military commanders or political leaders, but from two individuals who had seen their peoples destroy each other and realized that victory was meaningless if it meant the end of everything both species had ever built or dreamed. Thexani was the first to act. I am transmitting shutdown codes to all remaining Confluence automated systems. Our war machines will cease operations immediately. Yaren closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with a decision that would echo through galactic history. Admiral's Code 007, she said into her communicator. All Omega Protocol vessels are to stand down immediately. Mission abort. Repeat, mission abort. Across the galaxy, the killing stopped. The treaty that followed was written in blood and ash, signed by the survivors of two species that had nearly erased each other from existence. The Confluence would withdraw to the galactic rim, while humanity claimed the dead systems between them as a buffer zone that neither species would ever cross. The empty worlds would serve as a monument to what happened when perfect opposites met in battle. But both civilizations had one final gift for the galaxy. A warning broadcast to every species that achieved spaceflight, transmitted simultaneously from Confluence and human sources. The message was simple and terrifying in its implications. From the Confluence came elegant prose about the dangerous predators who lurked in the spiral arms, beings who had weaponized their very existence and would fight to the death rather than accept guidance or surrender. From humanity came something characteristically direct. We are humanity. We do not seek war, but we are very good at it. Choose your friends carefully because we have already chosen our enemies. The galaxy would never be the same.